in its call for the hostilities to stop and for responsible dialogue to resume. The longer the violence continues, the harder it will be to move forward toward lasting peace. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
legislation, as well as the Senator from New York, Senator Schumer, and the Senator from South Carolina, Senator Graham, for also being with us and working with this legislation in partnership to address all of the facets of this issue that have been long overdue in consideration by the United States Congress. This day has been far too long. Coming for the millions of American workers who are out of work or whose wages have been decimated as a result of our inability to compete with unfairly subsidized Chinese imports. Since Congress first began requiring the Treasury to analyze the exchange rate policies of foreign countries in 1988, China has been cited as a currency manipulator 5 times, all occurring between 1992 and 1994. Since then, despite China's continuation and in many ways intensification of these practices, our government, under both Democratic and Republican administrations, has failed to cite China even once for its policy of fixing its currency to the dollar. And this is also despite Congress's repeated efforts to make currency manipulation a top priority in our nation's trade agenda. In fact, in April 2005, I joined my Senate colleagues in decisively supporting an amendment calling on China to reform its currency practices. And this action is largely viewed as helping to prompt China to allow its currency to gradually appreciate between 2005 and 2008. In July 2007, I also joined with the majority of my colleagues on the Senate Finance Committee in favorably reporting out the Currency Exchange Rate Oversight Reform Act of 2007 by a vote of 20-1. 2007, that was 4 years ago. We had 6 years ago, and yet we still had not had any concrete substantive action on this fundamental issue. None of these bills were brought up for a vote by the full Senate. From 2008 to mid-2010, China again froze its exchange rate constant in an effort to maintain its production edge during the financial crisis. It was only last June that China showed signs that it might allow the renminbi to gradually appreciate. But according to the Congressional Research Service, it has gained only about 6 to 7% of the dollar over the last year. Faced with these blatantly inequitable trade distortions, I have witnessed Maine's manufacturers and their employees going to great lengths to improve their competitiveness. In fact, according to the Manufacturers Association of Maine, workers in our state have increased output per employee by 66% over a period of 8 years, from 60,000 in 2001 to 89,000 in 2009. Yet the dramatic job losses we have witnessed in the American manufacturing sector of the last decade tell a very different story, Mr. President. According to recent reports, between 2001, when China joined the World Trade Organization, and 2010, 4.1 million manufacturing jobs were lost in this country. And 1.9 million of those jobs, or 47%, can be directly linked to our growing trade deficit with China. In Maine, this withering of our manufacturing base has contributed to wage and salary employment levels falling precipitously through December 2010, with job losses of 26,900, or a 4.4% drop. Overall, employment numbers in my state have returned to the 1999 levels, Mr. President. 1999 levels, erasing any economic gains of the previous 10 years. U.S. manufacturing employees, including thousands who live in small towns throughout my state, are recognized as the most productive workers in the world. These are the types of jobs that should be thriving in a global economy. But they cannot if foreign producers like those in China are playing with a proverbial stacked deck. For this reason, I rise today to urge my colleagues to join us in supporting the Currency Exchange Rate Oversight Reform Act, legislation that I have authored with the Senator from Ohio to enforce the rules and address a paramount contributing factor in the decimation of our nation's once unparalleled manufacturing base, currency exchange rate manipulation. For over a decade, China has manipulated its exchange rate by pegging the Chinese renminbi to the dollar. As a result, China's currency is estimated to be undervalued by anywhere from 12 to 50%, according to the Congressional Research Service. In fact, despite the Chinese government's announcement last year that it would begin allowing its currency to gradually appreciate, the Treasury Department's exchange rate report released on May 27th noted that the real exchange rate of the renminbi remains substantially undervalued, end quote. Some of my colleagues will no doubt argue that mill closings and layoffs in states like Maine have little to do with the value of the Chinese currency, and that legislation to hold countries like China accountable when they intervene in currency markets will not create jobs or grow our economy. For that matter, proponents of China's entry into the World Trade Organization 10 years ago also claimed that liberalizing trade with China would improve our trade deficit. At the time of its entry into the WTO in December of 2001, China agreed to provide greater transparency when it comes to its trade policies, to enforce intellectual property rights, and to end discriminatory and unpredictable rules impeding market access for American products. In fact, as the agreement to allow China into the World Trade Organization was being negotiated in 2000, President Clinton argued it would create, in his words, a win-win result for both countries, end quote. However, as President John Adams once said, facts are stubborn things, so let's examine some of the evidence. For one, in January, I met with Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer for a few hours before he attended a private meeting at the White House. Mr. Ballmer told me that in fiscal year 2010, over 30 million PCs, personal computers, were sold in China that run illegal copies of Windows. And rather tellingly, Mr. Ballmer noted that while China is their second largest personal computer market in the world, it is 70th in terms of Microsoft revenue per personal computer. If one of the largest and most integrated companies in the world is being hamstrung by China's piracy and blatant infringement of intellectual property rights, how can we expect smaller U.S. companies to stand a chance when it comes to entering the Chinese market? And in addition to its failure to police intellectual property rights infringement, unlike most other countries where exchange rates are determined by market forces, the Chinese government does not allow the renminbi to fluctuate freely and instead pegs it tightly to the U.S. dollar at a rate that makes it significantly undervalued versus the dollar. As a result, Chinese exports to the United States are artificially made less expensive, as we well know, and the cost of U.S. exports to China and the rest of the world are made more expensive by a similar or equivalent amount. According to a new report featured last week in the Wall Street Journal, one significant consequence of China's trade practices is that over the last 2 decades, it has surged as an exporter at a breakneck pace, while the growth of U.S. spending on imports from China has climbed steadily. As indicated by this chart to my right, according to the report, imports from China as a share of a total U.S. spending has climbed from below 1% throughout much of the 1990s to over 5% today. And there's no question of the trajectory that's reflected in this chart, Mr. President, seeing China as a share of total U.S. spending and what has occurred dramatically, a dramatic rise without abatement, without any intervention whatsoever. We have seen a steady, major rise in terms of the amount of imports and the amount of spending by Americans on Chinese imports. Due in large part to China's currency manipulation and other distorting practices, manufacturers in places like Maine have not been able to compete against the surge in artificially cheap Chinese imports. And as Americans spend increasingly more in Chinese products, as we've seen illustrated in this chart, these imports displace goods marked made in the USA. Consequently, China's currency undervaluation has contributed directly to our soaring trade deficit with China, which has ballooned from $83 billion when China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001 to $273 billion in 2010. Those numbers are worth repeating, Mr. President, when he was speaking. About $83 billion was our trade deficit in 2001, and now in 2010 it has skyrocketed to $273 billion. This ever-expanding, explosive trade deficit, unprecedented, of course, in our history, which grew 20% between 2009 and 2010, destroys existing jobs, prevents new job creation, and as economists at the Economic Policy Institute have indicated, increases the global race to the bottom, in their words, when it comes to middle-class wages. For example, the Economic Policy Institute recently released a report noting that as plants have closed, workers displaced by trade from the manufacturing sector have had particular difficulty in securing comparable employment, and average wages of those who found new jobs fell by 11 to 13%. As you see again, that is reflected and demonstrated on this chart most graphically, is that the Economic Policy Institute's report discovered that since China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001 and through 2010, when you've seen that explosive growth in our trade deficit from the $83 billion to the $273 billion between 2001 and 2010, the increase in the U.S.-China trade deficits eliminated or displaced 2.8 million American jobs, or 310,000 jobs per year. So as you can see illustrated in this chart, virtually every state in America has been affected by the trade deficits with China that has displaced thousands and thousands of jobs, and in less than a decade, 2.8 million American jobs. In my state of Maine, this means the trade deficit has displayed nearly 10,000 workers, or nearly 2% of state employment. And as the chart depicts, the pain of job losses is not unique to one individual state or region of the country. Workers in all 50 states, from California to South Carolina, Michigan to Texas, have been harmed when they're unable to compete against artificially cheap Chinese imports. While these charts and reports may paint a picture of doom and gloom, there is recourse available to American workers injured by unfair trade. Under the U.S. countervailing duty law, tariffs can be imposed on imports benefiting from foreign government subsidies if it demonstrates that the subsidies cause or threaten injury to a U.S. industry producing the same or similar products. But while numerous U.S. industries have attempted to bring allegations of currency manipulation as an export subsidy under our trade laws, in each instance the Department of Commerce has refused to investigate. For example, it's a little-known fact that the U.S. pulp and paper industry employs 900,000 workers, roughly the equivalent number employed by the U.S. auto industry, making it an indispensable economic pillar in rural communities in Maine and across the country. Last year, several U.S. paper manufacturers with mills in Maine brought forward allegations that China was violating our trade rules by illegally subsidizing their product in the U.S. markets. Just 1 year ago, in September of 2005, before the International Trade Commission, it made the case, and we were ultimately successful on these points, that foreign-coated paper manufacturers in China and Indonesia were illegally selling their products in the U.S. at an unfairly subsidized and underpriced rate. Amazingly, however, the Commerce Department refused to investigate whether China's currency practices constitute an illegal and therefore countervailable export subsidy. Simply put, this failure to take action is unacceptable. In response, in November of last year, the senator from Ohio, Senator Brown, and I sent a letter to the Senate's leadership asking that a vote be scheduled on legislation directing the Commerce Department to investigate allegations that currency undervaluation provides a countervailable subsidy at the expense of American jobs. When the Senate failed to take action, Senator Brown and I filed a House-passed currency reform bill as an amendment to the tax extender package in December of 2010. In January 2011, during Chinese President Hu's visit to the U.S., we sent a letter to Secretary Geithner underscoring the need to enforce trade remedy laws to provide U.S. industries affected by China's currency practices with a lifeline to compete. And finally, in response to our government's failure to investigate these unfair trade practices, on February 10th of this year, Senator Brown and I introduced our legislation, the Currency Reform for Fair Trade Act. Simply put, the Department of Commerce has failed to use its authority to respond to currency manipulation by investigating these allegations brought by U.S. industry and placing countervailing duties on foreign imports benefiting from these unfair trade practices. The purpose of our bill is to make clear that Commerce has the ability to investigate, regardless of whether the subsidy is provided to all foreign businesses in a given country or just to those that are exporting. And that's an important point, Mr. President, because if we wait to make that demonstration, they're going to continue to export their goods to the United States before we could ever reach the point of being able to make that determination on imposing that countervailing subsidy, determining those companies, which companies in China are actually doing the exporting. So it is important to eliminate that distinction because that has been a barrier, and in fact it certainly prevented the Department of Commerce, in their words, from being able to impose any kind of subsidy or to investigate the case before they could impose a countervailing duty. So this way we eliminate the distinction, irrespective of whether or not a business is exporting within China their goods. The question is, we don't want to have to wait for the Department of Commerce to make that determination in those industries that do export, and once they do export, they've already done the damage. So it's clearly important to be able to have the Department of Commerce in a position at the outset being able to initiate this investigation on those companies that actually export goods to the United States from China at an unfair price. Notably, our bill does not legislatively deem that a currency undervaluation satisfies the requirement of finding a countervailable subsidy. It just requires Commerce to determine on a case-by-case basis whether currency undervaluation is giving foreign companies an unfair competitive advantage over their counterparts in our country. Since introducing our legislation in February, we have added 11 bipartisan, seven Senate co-sponsors, and in the House, companion to our legislation, over 200 co-sponsors. Furthermore, on September 23rd, I was proud to join as the lead original co-sponsor of the bipartisan legislation before us today that combines the key elements of our bill with critical provisions of the legislation authored by the Senator from New York, Senator Schumer, and the Senator from South Carolina, Senator Graham, that I also supported as an initiative when it came before the Senate Finance Committee in 2007. The merged bill utilizes U.S. trade law to counter the economic damage and harm to U.S. manufacturers caused by currency manipulation, and it authorizes new consequences for countries that fail to adopt appropriate policies to eliminate unfair currency undervaluation. Most critically, it will also provide businesses that are damaged by China's trade practices with the tools to respond on behalf of American workers, and ensures that our government will heed the requests of a wide range of U.S. industries, such as paper manufacturers in Maine, to investigate whether currency undervaluation by a government provides a subsidy, and one in which we can initiate an action by imposing countervailing duties. Finally, Mr. President, while some of my colleagues have expressed concerns that challenging China's unfair trade practices could lead that government to retaliate against U.S. goods and jeopardize our economic recovery, the fact is the potential benefit of currency reform is enormous when it comes to fighting unemployment and boosting the American economy, because as of today, China essentially rigs the game to undercut true market competition and undermine U.S. businesses. For example, a study released in June by the Economic Policy Institute discovered that addressing Chinese currency manipulation and enforcing fair trade provisions when it comes to these violations would support the creation of more than 2 million U.S. jobs, increase the gross domestic product by as much as $285 billion, and reduce the deficit by more than $70 billion a year. Failing to act now is not an option. The International Monetary Fund recently announced that China will surpass the United States economically in 2016, a mere 5 years from now. If this turns out to be true, it will be due in large part to our current policies, which are fueling our decline and China's rise. We import more than we export, running huge trade deficits, consume more than we produce, and outsource thousands of jobs. If one manufacturer is compelled to close because we fail to combat subsidized imports, that is one less manufacturer able to export and help grow our economy. And frankly, Mr. President, if there was ever a moment to empower our workforce when it comes to competing in the global economy, is there any doubt, given our dire economic state, that time is now? The Maine to the Midwest, China's currency manipulation has been among the greatest impediments to our manufacturing sector. And unfortunately, the silence of our government when it comes to this issue has become the silence of our factories. It is time to take action to rebuild our economic foundations, and this legislation, Mr. President, will ensure our government has the tools to respond on behalf of American companies and workers by imposing countervailing duties on exports subsidized by currency manipulation, undervaluation. It is absolutely vital that we take this action this year, right now, Mr. President, because, as I indicated at the beginning of my remarks, if you start to begin to look at the historical picture of the consideration of this legislation, it's clear that it has been underestimated, it's been overlooked in terms of the value that it brings to our country, to the value it brings to the manufacturing segment of our economy, to the value it brings to our workers. I'm deeply concerned because it always seems like it's an either-or proposition when we talk about trade-related issues, that we have to do nothing because otherwise we will invite a trade war. But we have to really determine, I believe, when we look at the trade practices of our trading partners and also the laws by which they are required to uphold. And in this case for China, it's through the World Trade Organization. They made a commitment at the onset when they joined that organization. They have refused to uphold it when it comes, to leveling the playing field and create the equilibrium, to let the currency float as required, and stipulated under that agreement when they became a member of that organization. They have failed time and again to monitor these agreements and to monitor the actions of their own companies with respect to this practice. And it has decimated so many industries across the country, as I indicated with this chart. And virtually every state in America has had damaged, has been damaged as a result of the loss of jobs because we've just failed to uphold the standards of fair trade. So it isn't about encouraging a trade war, far from it. I think it creates not only a level playing field, but it creates an equitable circumstance for our trading partners, and that it's important for those countries like China, if they're prepared to live up to the agreements to which they have subscribed in the World Trade Organization, then they're required to live by it. And that means that they have to establish the standards where they cannot manipulate their currency as they have been doing for more than 2 decades. It's been a problem. It's been a persistent problem. And unfortunately, on either side of the aisle, whether it's Democratic or Republican administrations, and the presidency or here in Congress, have failed to take a concrete, concerted action that could have made a profound difference long before now that we have reached this point. It could have been averted. Time and again, we haven't been able to have Treasury secretaries to designate China as a currency manipulator. But that, I think, then would have prompted much more significant action on the part of any administration. So that issue has been addressed in this legislation to change the threshold, to redesign and to target the legislation more precisely so that it will give the tools to the administration and specifically to the Treasury Secretary to be able to designate China as a currency manipulator that then kicks in certain safeguards and actions. The same is true for the Department of Commerce, that they will be able to initiate at the outset an investigation to determine whether or not devaluing the currency on the part of China has contributed to unfair trading practices and obviously affecting our goods and workers and companies here in the United States adversely. That's important to give the tools to our agencies to make sure they can fulfill their obligations. I know there are times in which they have not, even when they've had the tools and they've been empowered to use those tools, they have not done so. Much to the detriment of our industries and much to the detriment of these jobs and these manufacturing companies all across America that have either closed their doors or they have sharply curtailed, you know, their businesses or their level of employment. And I know that firsthand from my state, and it has really, I think, brought tremendous consequences to rural Maine and to rural America as a result, because that's where what has been the basis of our economy. It's been the manufacturing segment of our industry that has been so critical to good-paying jobs that ultimately has been damaged and harmed as a result of this currency manipulation issue that has been persistent on the part of the Chinese, and one that we now have to address through this legislation. So, Mr. President, I appreciate this opportunity to address the Senate on this critical issue, and as we go forward in the days ahead in debating this legislation, I look forward to working with my colleagues, the Senator from Ohio, who's done yeoman's work on this issue and has brought this issue to the highest levels in terms of its attention and importance to this country, most assuredly. And I'm looking forward to working with him and our other colleagues to make sure that we can fulfill our commitment to passing this legislation. It's not only about debating it, it's not only just voting on it, it's becoming law. And I think that we should bring this to its logical conclusion and send it to the President for his signature, because the time has come, as I said, and it's long overdue. And we have failed the workers and the industries of this country who are trying to compete, who can make goods. We're not going to forsake our manufacturing, sector, because we have the ability to make the best goods with the most productive workers in the world. And we should be able to continue to do that. And the only way we can fulfill that obligation that we have to them is through this legislation, because there's no other recourse at this moment in time. So I now yield the floor, Mr. President.
Mr. President. The Senator from Ohio. Thank you, Mr. President. I first of all thank Senator Snowe for her leadership on this currency legislation. Its time has come, as she said. She's been a real leader on this for months and months and months and months. And years, for that matter, and I so appreciate her work on this problem. Well, I think pure and simple, this is the most important bipartisan jobs bill that the Senate's passed since I've been a member of the Senate in my 4.5 years. Senator Snowe's been here a good bit longer time and has been a member of the Finance Committee that understands these issues of how China's gamed the system. Senator Snowe and I were joined in our legislation, combining it with Senator Schumer and Senator Graham in their legislation. Also, Senator Stabenow, a Democrat from Michigan, Senator Sessions, a Republican from Alabama, both senators from North Carolina, Senator Burr, a Republican, and Senator Hagan, a Democrat, joined by Senator Casey and the other Maine senator, Senator Casey from Pennsylvania, Democrat, and the other Maine senator, Republican, Senator Collins. And that just shows the bipartisan support here. We had this legislation today Senate Bill 1619 passed this body 79-19. The cloture was 79-19, which is a strong message to the House and to our colleagues that this legislation, as we debate this week, is so important. It's deserving of basically a week of the Senate's time to discuss and debate what China trade's all about. And we know what China trade's all about. We know, as Senator Snowe said, the trade deficit with China has ballooned in the 10 years since China has been part of the World Trade Organization. And think of it this way, Mr. President. We every day, we buy $750 million more from China than we sell to China every single day. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every day of every week, every year. So for the past year, $750 million we buy from China more than we sell to China. You just can't keep doing that, Mr. President. You can't keep doing that and hold the industrial base that the people of Oregon, the people of Maine, the people from Ohio care about it. And look at it this way for a moment, Mr. President. I don't want to inundate my colleagues with figures and numbers and dollars and job numbers and all that. But President Bush the first said $1 billion in trade surplus or trade deficit. $1 billion translates into 13,000 jobs. He said that 15 years ago. That number, no president's exactly said anything has quantified that since. But think about that. Thousands of jobs for every $1 billion in trade deficit or surplus. Well, with China alone, we have $750 million trade deficit every single day. Our trade deficit with the whole world is $600 billion, $1.5 billion a day, more than that. So $600 billion. We buy $600 billion more than we sell to the world every year. How can a country, no matter how wealthy, and this is a rich country still, even though, millions of people have been unemployed, have lost manufacturing jobs in my state and in other states across the country, how can we continue as a prosperous nation if manufacturing is outsourced? These jobs go somewhere else. And never before, I don't believe, Mr. President, ever in that I can think of in world history, and I've said this before and nobody's challenged it, have we seen a business plan of American companies moving to China, manufacturing there, and then selling back to the United States. A company like Procter & Gamble, on the other hand, they move production to China, but they sell from their Chinese operations. They sell to China and East Asia, probably Taiwan and maybe Japan and Malaysia and maybe India. I mean, they have their production in the areas they sell to. That makes perfect sense. That's good for those countries, good for those workers, good for the United States, good for Cincinnati, where Procter & Gamble is located. But these companies who have it as their business plan to shut down production here, move it to China, and then sell those products that they make in Shanghai and Wuhan and Beijing instead of in Akron, in Canton, and Toledo, sell those products back to consumers in Oregon and Ohio and Maine. And that's why this legislation is so important. New studies said that we've lost 2.8 million jobs in the last decade to China because of currency manipulation. 1.9 million of those jobs are manufacturing. You know what's happened in places, Mr. President, like Portland, and Senator from Maine knows what's happened in her Portland and what that has meant to lost jobs in this country. And the understanding, the reason that happens is because China games the system, because China doesn't play fair. Pure and simple, say it straight, because China cheats, China has been able to, and because China cheats, they've given, for all intents and purposes, a 25 or 30% subsidy to their products. So because they cheat on currency, putting aside how they subsidize their paper industry, for instance, with water and capital and energy and land, just on currency alone, when they sell something into the United States, they have a 25 to 30% cost advantage. I know companies I've talked to in Elyria, Ohio, in other places around my state, in Mansfield, in Springfield, in Zanesville, in Chillicothe, companies that will say, my cost of raw materials is higher than the cost of the product when it comes from China. Why? Because China cheats. And one of the ways they cheat is they undervalue their currency so that they have a 25% discount on their products sold into the United States. We can't compete with that, no matter that our workers are efficient, no matter that our companies are efficient, no matter that we cut costs in so many ways with the more advanced technologies and advanced manufacturing we do. So, Mr. President, that's why this was such an important step in passing, overwhelmingly sending to the floor for debate today, 79-19, this bipartisan jobs bill called the Currency Exchange Rate Oversight Reform Act of 2011. Today, earlier, I was in Cleveland, and I did a meeting with two owners of a company in Brunswick, Ohio, and it's more or less a Cleveland suburb, from Automation Tool and Die. It's a family company. It's been in operation since 1974. The owners, the two sons, Randy and Bill Bennett, spoke today about their company. They've got 55, I believe they said, employees who are a major part of American manufacturing. They're the kind of companies that, when it's such a disadvantage on currency, it puts them in a less than competitive position sometimes. They're still doing okay, but they know how hard it is, how hard the business climate is when they are at that disadvantage. So when they're making products, they can't, because China's gamed the system, and an American company might move to China to do production. They can't up and move. They're a family company of 55 employees. They can't move to China to service the company that's moved to China because of the competitive disadvantage. So we know how that's worked, Mr. President. We know why this legislation that Senator Snowe has worked on, the two bills we put together, Senator Snowe and my bill with Senator Schumer and Graham. And as I said, we've had good, strong bipartisan sponsorship on this bipartisan jobs bill. We've also had a very good vote today that was 79-19 to move this forward. The Economic Policy Institute issued a new report showing that addressing Chinese currency manipulation could support the creation of 2.25 million American jobs, mostly in manufacturing, mostly the kind of jobs that will create other jobs because of the wealth that Senator Snowe talked about, the wealth that manufacturing creates. And as Senator Snowe pointed out, when the opponents to this, and too often we've seen administrations of both parties oppose bills like this, when opponents say this is protectionism, I don't quite know what's wrong with protecting our families and protecting our neighbors and protecting our country, but ceding that, they say this is protectionism. This, in fact, is a reaction to Chinese protectionism. And China, the People's Republic of China, the Communist Party of China, has not really believed in the rule of law when it comes to trade. And this is an emphatic, strong insistence by the United States Senate that we do believe in the rule of law for international trade, that we do think all actors should behave. We do think that everybody in the trading system should work on a level playing field. Today was one of the biggest steps, the biggest step I've seen the United States Senate take since I came here in 2007. We're going to have a long debate this week. Everybody's going to get their chance. Some members of the Senate are still not quite sure that wanted us to debate this, are still not quite sure exactly where we go with this. I think it's pretty clear, though, that the United States Senate today reflects what the people of this great country believe, that we make things. My state is the third largest manufacturing state in America. Only Texas and California, states of twice and 3 times our size and population, make more than we do. We know how to make things. We know how to make big things. We need to continue to produce things. We know that manufacturing creates wealth. This is a huge victory, only a first step, but a huge first step in the victory for American manufacturing to help us reindustrialize our country. Mr. President, I thank my colleagues for this 79-19 vote. I thank Senator Snowe especially for her terrific work on both sides of the aisle in getting this bill moving forward. It's going to matter for workers in Toledo and Dayton and Cleveland and Columbus, and for that I'm grateful. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The senator from Ohio.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination. Number 359, that the nomination be confirmed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order to the nomination, that any related statements be printed in the record, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action and the Senate resume legislative session.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, October 4th, 2011, that following the prayer and pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. That following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business with 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with majority controlling the first half, Republicans controlling the final half. And following morning business, the Senate resumed consideration of the motion to proceed to S-1619, the Currency Exchange Rate Oversight Reform Act, post-closure. Further, the Senate recessed from 12:30 until 2:15 for weekly caucus meetings. Finally, at 2:30, all post-closure time on the motion to proceed to S-1619 be yielded back. The motion to proceed be agreed to, and following the reporting of the bill, the majority leader be recognized.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, will be in consideration of SB 1619 during Tuesday's session. Senators will be notified when votes are scheduled. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
The Senate voted to move forward on a bill outlining sanctions the U.S. can impose on China if the Treasury Department finds China